So that would be my first message for you. That please be advised that we are going to be recording this meeting so that we have a record of it. So please be aware of that. Second, as you entered this meeting, everyone was muted. Please do you'll be stay muted until our question and answer period at the end, in which case please do use the raise hands function or type a question into the chat. I will be monitoring the chat room in order to pose questions when we get to the question and answer period at the end. And I have enabled slide sharing for the people that are presenting today. So when we get to that portion of the agenda for our speakers from Eversource, National Grid, Unitil, please do identify yourselves so that I can enable slide sharing for your portion of the presentation. And with that, I think that's the logistics for today's meeting. I will certainly monitor the chat function and otherwise serve as your host. And with that, Dan, I think we can get to the substance.
Great. Let's see if I can grab the screen in order to share the agenda. Hopefully this will all work. There we go. And great. Welcome everyone to the summer 2021 meeting. Kirk, can I just get a thumbs up if you're seeing what we should be seeing here? Okay, great. So I thought we'd start with a really quick TCI update, just hitting some basic things on what's happening there. We're going to hear back from the Vehicle for Hire Working Group, which has a recent report on some recommendations for that really important sector. We have an update coming from SCEC on 2 programs that they're running, both the Accelerating Clean Transportation for All grant opportunity, as well as fleet advisory services for medium and heavy duty vehicles. We also have a really quick agenda update here, update from Recharge Massachusetts, who's going to give some update about the return to live events and some of the things that they're thinking about in the education and outreach space. And then for the bulk of our meeting today, we're going to be hearing about a really important filing that the utilities have made in front of the Department of Public Utilities on electric vehicle charging infrastructure. I anticipate that to be, you know, the bulk of the meeting in terms of time. You know, I do want to invite questions, not just for the very end, but along the way. So, you know, the chat box is open to all. For ZEV Commission members, if you want to use the raise hand function, we can maybe get in some questions along the way in addition to the end. But then I did want to leave the last half hour for public comment. So both people who are ZEV Commission members and the broader public are invited to speak then. To start with a really quick TCI update. So in June, the TCIP, the participating jurisdictions, released new materials on the Transportation and Climate Initiative that I think give you a sense of how program implementation is moving forward. One of those documents is the TCIP model rule, which weighs in at a svelte 160 pages and puts some of the meat on the bones of how program administration is going to work. There's also a draft framework for public engagement that has some commitments by the jurisdictions about how we're going to try to engage the public in the TCIP process. There's a model implementation plan that kind of goes through some of the steps that jurisdictions are committing to in terms of implementing the program. And then there's some proposed strategies for regional collaboration. So those are some areas where TCIP jurisdictions are starting to think about how we can work together for some regional solutions, looking at things like air monitoring in environmental justice communities, working together on the medium and heavy duty space, thinking about an electric vehicle charging corridor in the region, other things like that. I'm not going to get into more detail than that, in part because I don't have anybody from Mass DEP here to correct me if I say something wrong. And also because there is a really good in-depth recording from a webinar that we had in June that's available on the TCI website. I did just want to bring it up today because I want to note that TCI is accepting input on all of these documents by August 13th, 2021. So that's through the public input portal. I'm going to go ahead and update, put the link to that, to both the webinar and to the public input portal into the chat. So, you know, if you are interested in providing comment, you know, we definitely want to hear it. Public engagement continues to be a really critical part of making this program work. So with that, I'm not going to take questions on this part right now, but instead going to move us along to the report back from the Vehicles for Hire working group. So Meg, or I don't know, it might be Allison, if you want to.
I'll be presenting today. Thanks, Dan.
Meg, thanks.
Awesome. Is my audio good?
Yes, sounds good.
Great. Well, while I am bringing up my slides, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, I guess. I'm Megan Aki. I'm a Clean Energy and Climate Systems Manager at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. I work at our Clean Energy Department at MAPC. And for those who don't know MAPC, we're the regional planning agency that serves the 101 cities and towns in the greater Boston area. And I'm here to give an update on the Ride for Hire electrification working group that MAPC has facilitated this past year. I'm just trying to get my screen share working. Hold on. Oh, it's doing everything. All right. Does that look good? Yep. Great. So appreciate the time on the agenda to be able to give this update. Sort of background on what we're working on. This is a working group that myself and then my colleagues in our transportation department, primarily Allison and Felix, is also on the call today and available to answer questions that we might have about the working group effort. This is something that we facilitated starting last fall. Dan invited MAPC to bring together key stakeholders to tackle what kinds of incentives might the state be able to put in place, or programs and policies that could accelerate and expedite electrification of the ride for hire sector. So the report's available at this link, and you can download and take a closer look at what we did with the working group and the final policy recommendations. But I'm just going to go over kind of a quick overview of who was involved, what we did, and the main focus areas of those policy recommendations. So I won't go over all of this, but just to kind of define some key terms when we're talking about ride for hire, this is including both the transportation network companies, or TNCs. So that's, you know, referring to Uber and Lyft, and then also taxi and livery operators as well. We know that this is a big sector of emissions in Massachusetts, with the number of rides growing incredibly over the past few years, and is something that, as we think about tackling our climate impacts in Massachusetts, is something that we need to figure out how to electrify those miles and reduce the overall miles traveled as well. So for the working group that we pulled together, the purpose of it was really to identify some of those near and long-term incentive policies and programs that would help to increase adoption of electric vehicles. And when we're thinking about this, it's both the individual drivers and also the fleets and the ride for hire companies themselves. And the end goal of what we produced is a prioritized set of recommendations for EEA to consider as it moves forward in policymaking to reach the state's climate goals. This is just a list of all the many folks who came to our meetings and contributed their expertise. Really appreciate everyone who engaged in really great conversations around this table. I think there's probably a lot of the same folks on this call that were on our working group meetings over the past 8 months. So a lot of representation across government agencies, utilities, nonprofits, and the ride-hailing, taxi, and livery industries themselves as well. So we had 5 meetings in total. The first few meetings really focused on sharing information about sort of other examples we could look to at states across the US. First tackling sort of charging infrastructure challenges and opportunities. and then working more into actual access to electric vehicles and how we can reduce those barriers. At our final two meetings in 2021, we started to sort of get more in-depth feedback on some of the draft recommendations we developed based on all the feedback we've gotten at the first three meetings. And then in April, we're able to kind of come to consensus and make some minor adjustments to develop the final priority recommendations for EEA. So in terms of how we approached developing the proposals, and this is all kind of taking into consideration the working group member feedback and the information that we gathered throughout the process. There are sort of three main tenets that guided the report and the final recommendations. So we wanted to really focus the incentives on reducing barriers to electrification for the target audiences. And we identified sort of three main audiences from the working group conversations, and one being the fleet operators within the ride for hire industry that have, a full fleet of vehicles with electrification opportunities, and then individual drivers who may be using their personal vehicles to fulfill their role within the company that they're working for. And then the third target audience that kind of crosses over all of those, but that has broader implications as well, is thinking about low to moderate income drivers and how we can support them in electrifying their vehicles as well. So across all the recommendations, there's also strong interest from working group members and also from MAPC in considering the social equity impacts and benefits across the incentive components. And then also taking an approach where we can think through how to have both complementary vehicle and charging infrastructure incentive programs that help streamline that prospect of electrification for ride for hire drivers. So to give an overview of the recommendations, and again, you can take a much closer look in the report, and I'll add a link to the chat after I present, but we had four main categories for the final recommendations, focusing on vehicle incentives, charging infrastructure, creating a dedicated funding source, and then also driver and education and driver incentives. So I'll just run through kind of what each of those categories touches on. So the first main bucket, looking at vehicle incentives, really focuses in on creating either a standalone rebate program or something in addition to the existing More EV rebate that would target specifically qualified high mileage fleet operators and drivers. In addition to that, things that we considered were also creating an additional rebate for low to moderate income drivers, and then including certified pre-owned used vehicles as a part of the rebate structure. And these were directly in response to barriers that have been identified and also increasing the incentive amount that's available for ride for hire drivers to be able to electrify their vehicles. Additionally, under vehicle incentives, we also developed a recommendation around creating a zero interest vehicle loan program and financial consultation services to help folks finance the purchase of an electric vehicle over time. And then it's probably the most recommendations in charging infrastructure. A lot of conversation with the working group around how critical deployment of strategic infrastructure, both in terms of DC fast charging infrastructure and residential charging, that would provide access to the type of charging needs that this particular market segment needs to be able to electrify their particular use case. So here, the first three recommendations kind of tie into what we're going to hear more about today as well, around the role of the electric utility companies in supporting electrification. So the first proposal here is around expanding the fleet advisory service program that National Grid has to other electric utility companies across the state, and specifically focusing those services on assisting ride for hire fleets in electrifying over time. And then in addition to that, supporting residential charging in the next iteration of the Make Ready programs to support that deployment of the residential charging that's needed to support ride for hire drivers. And then also acknowledging the need for rate design proposals that would make the economics more feasible in terms of making that switch from gasoline to electric vehicles for these high mileage drivers. The second set of charging infrastructure incentives and proposals that we included have to do with publishing origin destination data from ride for hire providers to help strategically inform where stations would be most utilized and most beneficial in supporting these drivers in making the shift to electric vehicles. The other proposal here is around expanding incentives for DC fast charging stations and coordinating application of ride for hire providers to actually get those stations installed where they need them to support their fleets in electrifying. And then the last proposal around charging infrastructure has to do with kind of working with existing infrastructure that may be in place to allow these drivers to utilize charging stations during off hours. So thinking about, you know, workplace charging that's deployed that may not be utilized at night, or multi-unit dwelling charging that may only be utilized sort of at night, but not during the day. So where are these stations that we already have in place that could potentially be used by this segment of the population if there were sort of more agreements put in place? And this is probably the more nascent recommendation, but we wanted to acknowledge that this could be a potential opportunity. So the next category that's in the final recommendations is around having a dedicated funding source. So the working group members wanted to acknowledge that while there are some potential areas of funding that could feed into some of the incentives that were proposed here, like TCI and some of the recovery investments that are coming from the federal level, create opportunities to invest. There is still a need to have a sustainable source of revenue to support these types of programs to really accelerate that adoption for ride for hire drivers. The other funding recommendation has to do with sort of implementing an additional fee for additional electric vehicle incentives for the drivers, more on the ride for hire company side of things. And lastly, the two other proposals have to do with sort of education and additional driver incentives. So this first one here is around creating public recognition of ride for hire companies for any electrification incentives, outreach, and education plans that they take as a part of the existing Mass Evolves program. And then lastly, another thing that came from the conversations with working group members is the need for resources and funding to support retraining specifically for the taxi and livery fleet mechanics, and also rental fleet operators so that they're equipped and ready to handle the electric vehicles that we're hoping they will deploy. So that's just a real quick summary of all of the recommendations that are included in the report. There's a lot more detail that is in these slides in the actual report itself, so you can dig into the nuances of what these actual policies that we're suggesting could look like. And a lot of it, I think, is sort of the recommendation from the working group, and then we're looking to EEA and other key stakeholders in terms of how this might actually work in Massachusetts. The last piece that I wanted to flag here is that one of the things that we did with the final working group conversation is, out of these 14 proposals that we came to consensus on, start to prioritize sort of what makes the most sense for near-term implementation, what's the highest priority. And these 5 out of the 14 were the ones that the working group members ranked as their top priority and recommendation for EEA to address in the coming year. So again, repeat of the information I already shared, but these are the 5 that got prioritized from that conversation. And that's it. So happy to answer questions. I'm not sure if we have a ton of time for that because I know it's a packed agenda, but myself and Allison are happy to have follow-up conversations with folks if you're interested in learning more about the working group effort and the recommendations. And feel free to reach out to us as our contact information. I can share these slides with Dan to send around as well.
That's great. Thanks, Meg. So I do think we are going to post the slides from today's presentation on the ZEV Commission website as well. So in that, you can take a look there after the meeting. Let me actually just invite, if anybody who was part of this working group wants to raise their hand. I do see Paul Augustine from Left on here to talk about maybe what some of what you think is maybe the top priorities coming out of this space. Would be interested in your input if you'd like to give it, either in the chat window or by raising your hand. Yeah, there we go. Kirk, can you go ahead and unmute Paul there?
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was a tremendous effort. It was so valuable to get all of the different stakeholders in the room. So kudos to the team for organizing this. I think the recommendations are really align with what we think are going to address the main barriers to TNC electrification in Massachusetts. So look forward to next steps on advancing those recommendations.
Great, thanks, Paul. Any other questions or comments here? Oh, go ahead, Jordan. Can we unmute Jordan, who is a commissioner? Go ahead, Jordan.
Great, thanks, Dan. Just want to start by commending everybody who's part of that working group. That's a tremendous set of recommendations, and I'm excited to see all of them happen. My question is about what's next for those recommendations. So I don't know if this is more a question for you, Dan, or for Megan and the leadership team of this working group, but how do you see us moving from recommendations to policy change?
Great question, and we're certainly, thinking it through. I think one thing that we're thinking about is the potential of the pilot program to start, and we'll hear more about at least one opportunity there in a minute. But really, I think this is going to be one part of us really thinking about how we can do more to address some of these high priority, high mileage, environmental justice oriented fleets. I think there will be interest in doing more, and exactly how that takes shape is still kind of being figured out internally. Great. So with that, let me turn things over to the Mass DEC folks who have exciting update of their own. Ariel, do you have the ability to grab the screen?
Yes, set for that. You should be unmuted as well.
Great. So let me just share the slides, and hopefully everybody can see these.
Yep.
Excellent. Great, thanks, Dan. So I'm Ariel Horowitz. I'm a senior program director at the Mass Clean Energy Center. I'm just going to give a brief update on accelerating clean transportation for all, which is the pilot and demo grant opportunity that Dan just mentioned. So as a quick overview of the program, at Mass DEC, we generally do a lot of pilot and demo funding focused on helping the state build a clean energy economy that can be compliant with our net zero by 2050 goal. And in this program, our mission is to address inequities in the clean transportation sector and, as I mentioned, help further those goals and meet the GWSA targets and the targets in the Clean Energy and Climate Plan for 2030. We're seeking to fund projects that really increase access to clean transportation technologies and reduce greenhouse gas emissions in that way, as well as decreasing health impacts and related burdens from the existing transportation system. We're also seeking projects that can demonstrate replicable, innovative business models or scalable incentive models that are able to address some of the issues associated with reaching vulnerable populations that we've seen in incentive programs, both internal to the Commonwealth and just sort of incentive policy generally in the US, and really demonstrate effective program delivery, partnerships with community groups, and implementation models. We're also very interested in proposals that are coming from geographical diversity throughout the state and making sure that we can help contribute to building a clean transportation economy that it sort of functions for the entire state and all the different types of communities that we have in the Commonwealth. This is the first time that we're doing planning grants for one of our pilot and demo programs at Mass DEC. So we're very excited about this. We've heard a lot of, we've heard a lot of stakeholder interest in planning grant opportunities. And so we wanted to make sure that that was a component of this particular program structure. The way that we're running this is the planning grants are $7,500 flat capped grants we'll pay out a portion once we sign a letter agreement, and the remainder once we get a full proposal package submitted into the RFP. Any nonprofit or community benefits organization or municipality are all eligible. We will have final discretion over applicant eligibility. The big thing, we're seeking just a pretty lightweight letter of intent. And we're going to govern the planning grants with a letter agreement that is not really open to redlining. So I know that that can be a little bit of a trick for municipalities. We've had, I think, 4 of these come through already. We do have funding available for more than that. So if a planning grant would help you put together a project that would be able to respond into this RFP, please, if you have any questions about it, please let us know, or else, this opportunity is open. So just to give a more of an overview of the solicitation itself and what specific types of projects we're seeking. We are looking for pilots in 4 different topic areas. The first one is incentive programs, ranging from e-bike, vehicle for hire, and car sharing, which would follow up on the MAPC working group activities, and retirement of high impact polluting vehicles, to be able to really think about sort of expanding the consumer market and what should the incentive programs look like that can make that clean transportation market more equitable. We're looking for projects that are focused on broadening the EV consumer base through additional consumer education and representation models. And then also our third topic area is innovative models for what we're calling high mileage, low radius fleets. We think that this is the topic area that will have the most sort of direct impact on air quality and health benefits. This came out of some thinking on short range delivery fleets, but I think there's a range of different fleet types that could be applicable for this topic area. In particular, we're looking for projects here that think about sort of a replicable model for how to rebuild this type of fleet from the ground up, more than a vehicle for vehicle replacement, and sort of reform a fleet model to take advantage of all the benefits of the electric modality. We also have another option for folks who don't see their projects as fitting into any of the 3 of those, but I will note that our main priority is to get projects funded in these 3 topic areas. At the moment, we have $2 million earmarked for this program. We're looking for projects that are sized in the 100K to 500K range. We have an option to bid a supplemental budget up to $1 million that will help sort of inform our overall evaluation. And in particular, we're interested in knowing how projects would align with the interim CECP for 2030 and reach historically overburdened communities. In terms of how we're looking for projects to target different priority populations, we describe in each one of the topic areas how we're viewing priority populations for that particular topic area. You can see a list on this slide as to some of the ways that we're thinking about this. But again, I think it really depends on the specific topic area and the project type. And we're very much looking for applicants to demonstrate that they've partnered, they've thought about this in the way that they've crafted both the application team and the proposed project itself. We are available at Mass CEC to provide guidance on any application ideas that folks may have questions about, both an introduction to the topic area, what our intent was. The topic areas were something we worked very closely with Dan and Undersecretary Chang to craft. So we're very excited to sort of see what the market has on these particular topics that we've laid out. We're also happy to talk people through anything around our eligibility criteria, the questions around priority populations that I just mentioned, what we're going to expect in terms of reporting, or what we think might be sort of an interesting research question in any of these topic areas. We have a collaboration platform that we're hosting. So we have a Slack channel that you can sign up for and help find project partners. We're also happy to again, sort of respond to any questions that folks have about partnering. In terms of the timeline and logistics, the RFP is open now. The application is available on our website. You can see the URL there on the slides. And as Dan said, I think we'll be posting these slides. For questions, you can either sign up for our office hours, which I'll mention the dates in a second, or email us directly. Applications are due the day after Labor Day. And we will be notifying awardees in December of this year. We're looking for these projects to be able to get spun up relatively quickly so that we can inform future allocation of state resources and policy development in the next year and coming years. We have been running office hours for this RFP. We had several in July, and we will have 2 more in August. I think we've gotten some decent sets of questions in those office hours, and we hope to get continued participation. You can see the dates there and sign up on our website. We just run those as basically a Zoom where our staff will be on that Zoom for the entire 2-hour period, and folks can either sign up in advance or just pop in, ask a question, pop out. We're just trying to make ourselves available for Q&A about this opportunity. We would very much appreciate any help from folks on the line about spreading the word. We've been putting this on our social media channels, but I think in particular, we're trying to reach beyond some of our frequent flyers in terms of energy world stakeholders, and really think about how programs like this and incentives like this can reach populations that are less routinely engaged in sort of state incentive program development. And as I mentioned, please feel free to reach out with questions. Our team email is on this slide, as well as my personal email. Happy to take questions and direct them as appropriate.
Great, thanks, Ariel. So let me also just say that I would love to also be in contact with people who are interested in this program. I think we see it as a really exciting opportunity for us to try to reach a set of drivers, a set of residents that have been challenging to reach with electric vehicle programs traditionally, and thinking about the vehicle for hire market, thinking about e-bikes, thinking about car sharing, thinking about underrepresented communities. I think this is a great opportunity. So, if there are opportunities to engage with community stakeholders, we're definitely going to take advantage of that. So let me just pause and ask if there are any questions for Ariel or about this program. Let me give that a minute. Okay, great. Hearing none, thank you, Ariel. We can move on to Recharge Massachusetts for an exciting update. Go ahead, Kirk.
Thanks, Dan. Let's see if I can succeed in sharing a presentation here real quick. Can you see that okay? And can you hear me okay, Dan? Terrific. Great to be here. Thanks so much, Dan, for giving us some time on the agenda. I know you've got a lot to cover, so I'll be brief, but I'm here to just give a report out on what's been happening with Mass Evolves over the past few years. This program the state of Massachusetts has been running for the past several years to expand education, adoption, and charging infrastructure in the electric vehicle space, really using 2 primary drivers. One has been direct EV test drive work across the state, and just wanted to say thank you to a number of our participants here today for helping us with this recent event we just held on July 22nd as part of the Mass EV Experience Expo. This was a notable activity because it was the first chance for us to come back to some in-person EV experience work, given everything that's been happening on the public health side of things. So we had a terrific event doing EV test drive work with Eversource, National Grid, Northeastern University, and a number of others serving as partners for the event, and had a number of stakeholders that could describe work with electrification happening across the state. And this work with EV test drive engagement, this has been ongoing for the past several years. And so as the state reflects on what it's been working on here, the catalog of outcomes continues to grow. I mean, so obviously last year was a focus more on virtual than physical events, but to date, over 60 events, over 4,500 direct experiences. And the data from the survey work we do that I think is notable for this group to just be aware of, once introduced to the vehicles, the trailing data show that within 3 to 6 months, 17% of participants are opting to either purchase or lease an electric vehicle after their experience. And for those that are not quite yet in the market, the shift in perception around the opportunities for driving electric, it's an 84% improvement in terms of perception around driving electric. So this intervention of continuing to introduce people to the vehicles for the first time through test drives continues to be really powerful. And so part of my presentation here is really an invitation. We have the opportunity to do some of this work going forward in different locales across the state, and to the extent that entities are aware of locations that would be good candidates for EV test drive work, we're really open to hearing about that, even as we're managing for the public health considerations that are going on now. So whether or not that'll be a virtual event or a physical event, we can sort out. But the other part of this work has not just been the test drive piece, but it's also been this part about pulling forward and recognizing leadership. And so the goal here is to identify entities, higher education, business, community-based organizations that are taking steps to advance electrification in whatever way makes sense for them, and to spotlight those examples so that others can learn. And this process has been very powerful. It asks participants to engage with the program by pledging to take some action. We capture a case study of the work that's done, and then we report on progress and share lessons learned. And the kinds of activities entities are taking really runs the gamut, because again, this is about acknowledging what's appropriate given particular circumstances. So it can be everything from charging infrastructure initiatives to promotion activities to even fleet and supply chain work. And the range of participants that have come forward across the state so far has been terrific. You'll see in this quick map that we've got a good sample geographically across the state, different kinds of entities engaging. And the key notion underneath all of this is that all of these organizations are willing to say publicly that they're working in the space to advance electrification, and then they're willing to help share their experience so other people can follow suit. And the key idea that we're working with here is, even though for all of us who are very much involved with electrification on a day in, day out basis, might be aware of what's happening in communities across the state, if you're not in this field, you may not understand it. And you may even walk right by charging infrastructure and not be aware of what you're seeing. So what we're trying to do here is help surface that this transition is taking place, that entities all across the state are participating, and there's great leadership work happening. So one of the invitations that I would actually offer to this group too is, to the extent that you're aware of entities that have done this kind of work, they're installing infrastructure, they're doing promotion work, they're advancing fleet electrification, we would love to hear about that at Mass Evolves, and we would love to pull those case studies forward. The program includes a few things that we do. We create case studies with participants. We support peer learning and educational programs. And then every year we run a recognition event at the State House. And this project, our goal, once we're safely able to reconvene at the State House in person, over time, our goal is to fill this great staircase at the State House with all the participants, the electrification evolution that's happening across the state. Our date for the 2021 event is November 17th. So we have plenty of time to engage with entities and bring people into the program. So again, to the extent that you're aware of entities that would be a good participants in this program, we would love to hear about those entities now and to engage with them as soon as possible. One other note, we're going to be doing some positioning work around what we call all of this in the next few weeks, and really repositioning it as part of a unified Recharge Massachusetts initiative. One of the things we've been reflecting on with our language is that, we really care about these notions, and fundamentally this work is about equity. It's access and education for everybody. It's economic opportunity. When we keep energy dollars local through this transition to electrification, we create benefits across the board. And then of course, the clean air benefits accrue to all of us. And so we'll be pulling the recognition and the direct test drive language into this notion about Recharge Massachusetts. And that gives us a good entry point then to kind of bring these notions together a little bit better. So this process we use to celebrate and promote leadership so that others can learn. When we launch this conversation at a community level, it also gives us a chance to bring forward some of those community leaders that maybe otherwise are less likely to engage in a conversation, that they might be less interested in an energy conversation to say, but much more interested in a conversation that's about local opportunity. And so as we move forward with Recharge Massachusetts, we're going to be, really thinking about how we can pull these pieces together of, the elements of communities that come forward, the business, the civic, local philanthropy, local investment partners, to create a better framework and, if you will, community by community ecosystem for supporting this transition across every part of Massachusetts and supporting every community. So that's it again, Dan. Thank you for the time, and it's really exciting to be able to report on this work. The participants in the recognition program have been nothing but generous and terrific to work with, and we're seeing some real evidence of impact as we see the numbers grow in terms of vehicle count, infrastructure commitments, and also the education work that goes on. So thank you very much, and Dan, thanks for giving us a chance to provide an update.
Thanks, Kirk. It was great to have a live in-person event again. That was really exciting, and I think I came away from that feeling very optimistic. Just one question from Vina at the Sierra Club. Is there a website that lists the work that is being done by participants in the program?
Yes, I'll pop it in chat right here, and you can for certain reach out to me too directly if there's more questions. Vina, I'm happy to chat with you about that. Great question.
Great. So with that, let's turn things over to some conversation about the recent utility filing in front of the Department of Public Utilities. I think this is going to be a pretty significant and impactful filing and decision that is going to be in front of the DPU. Let me turn things over, I think, to Rishi first at National Grid to walk us through, what's being proposed and how they're thinking about things.
Thanks, Dan. Can you confirm if you can see my slide and you can hear me okay?
Yes, both you look and sound good.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Dan, and thank you to the ZEV Commission members for this opportunity. Today, my name is Rishi Sondhi, and I'm with the Clean Transportation team at National Grid. So together with my colleagues at Eversource and Unitel, we'd like to present an overview of the recent EV program and our alternative to demand charge proposals that we filed on July 14th. So I'll kick us off with a quick update on where we're coming from, just to provide some context. So we all know that transportation is the biggest source for emissions and pollutions in Massachusetts and in the Northeast. So we share a vision that in Massachusetts, clean transportation will be universal, and the benefits that come from this transformation will be shared by all our customers and communities. So we used these different principles as we look to craft our next iteration of EV proposals. And what we think is, we believe our programs will support a cleaner environment, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Our customers and communities should have equitable and affordable access to clean transportation choices, going beyond just the passenger vehicles. And then finally, the utilities have a unique role to play in integrating EV charging into their system in a grid optimized manner, which enables this clean energy future. So we have worked hard to align our proposals in a way that supports the state policy goals, including the ZEV MOU goals, but then also sets the trajectory to achieve the CECP targets in future and a net zero future by 2050. How do we go about and do that? Certainly we have a role to play, but we also want to work with all our stakeholders, including the ZEV Commission members, in enabling this future. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the unique components of our proposals next. And again, for some context, as you may remember, the department issued an order in May, which touched on grid modernization, AMI, additionally, and for EV programs. And I'd like to share some of the key components there and how we are looking to align with that order. So certainly the department provided a framework for us to include EV programs and demand charge alternative proposals in a single and a separate proceeding. It asked us to coordinate among the utilities, which we had already been doing in terms of developing our next proposals. And additionally, there was a focus on developing programs that address the unique needs for environmental justice communities, and also to align our programs with other EV infrastructure and rebate programs available in the Commonwealth, and then additionally look to coordinate programs that we have in other parts of our organization, such as the energy efficiency programs. And so all of these were filed on July 14th. And I'm pleased to say that the utilities coordinated extensively in the development of the program. And what you'll see next is sort of the alignment in terms of our offerings and how we have developed these proposals. And just to provide a sort of a high-level overview, our programs have three core components addressing unique needs within these three segments. So firstly, a focus on public and workplace programs. Here, at least in National Grid and Eversource, we already have experience in deploying public and workplace programs. And in this iteration of the programs really excuse me, scales up the infrastructure proposals to meet the state ZEV MOU goals. And why this is important is that public charging remains one of the biggest barriers for EV adoption. And with this programs, we look to address the infrastructure needs to enable those ZEV goals. Additionally, we know residential segment is also very important because most of the charging currently happens at home, but at the same time, we understand that roughly half of our customers have some sort of a barrier to deploy EV charging at their residences. So utilities have a unique role in enabling charging at home, but also making sure that that charging happens in a grid optimized manner. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Finally, we are also focusing on the fleet segment, which is an emerging segment as more and more vehicles come to market in the electric option. But it is an important one because of the significant impacts in terms of greenhouse gas reductions and pollution. And just as an example, an average medium heavy-duty truck will reduce carbon dioxide by more than 8 times, and the particulate matter 2.5 by over 30 times compared to average passenger vehicle. So it's really important to think about these programs in a comprehensive manner, addressing the needs for each of these segments. And then bringing this all together is sort of our offerings around rates and managed charging options. And as I mentioned at the start of the presentation, that utilities have a unique role in enabling all this charging in a grid optimized manner. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Next, I'll hand off the slides to my colleague, Kevin Bond from Eversource, to kind of walk us through the program details. Kevin?
Yep, great. Thanks, Rishi. My name is Kevin Bond. I'm a manager of clean energy strategy at Eversource. As Rishi mentioned, I'll take us through some of the shared programmatic elements, a little bit of the details that run through the program filings. So first up is the public and workplace make-ready offerings. Really, this builds off both companies' successful programs that we've been implementing since 2018. The new elements here, so we'll continue to fund the make-ready, both the utility side infrastructure and the customer side infrastructure. What's new about what we've introduced for the filings going forward, starting in 2022, is adding some incentives for the EVSE hardware itself. So for public and workplace level 2, up to 50% of the EVSE hardware would be rebated. For environmental justice communities, all level 2s would be funded at 100% rebate. And then for DC fast chargers, we set an incentive level for public DC fast chargers at 40,000 per port, and then DC fast chargers in environmental justice communities at 80,000 per port. We also heard from stakeholders and customers that some of the soft costs, particularly the networking fees, were a barrier. So depending on the segment, there is, we also introduced a one-time rebate to cover the average of $120 per port per year for 4 years, which would be $480 per port as a stipend to cover that. Really, this is the core of the make-ready filing. It's sized to meet the requirements for ports installed to support the state's goal of 300,000 vehicles on the road by 2025. Again, this is a 4-year program intended to launch in 2022 and take us through the end of 2025, which matches up with that 2025 ZEV MOU commitment goal. I think I'll take it to the next slide. Next slide is a new offering for both companies. Well, at least half of it is. So really, this is the large MUD, which we would consider multi-unit dwellings of 5 units or more, really be aligned with the workplace and public charging program that I just described above. Again, for non-EJC customers, the EVSE hardware funded at a 50% rebate, and then 100% for our EJC customers. New to this filing is a program to support so rebates, 2 different rebates. One for the incremental cost of a networked level 2 charger, which would be up to $300, and also a stacked rebate, which would cover the wiring upgrades to enable 240 volt outlet at both a single family home or in 2 to 4 unit duplex. And those differences in rebates reflect the differences in typical installation costs at those types of units. For our low income and EJC customers, we're introducing sort of a single turnkey solution rebate that would cover both the cost of the level 2 charger and the wiring upgrades to enable the 240 volt installation. And then finally, the third major component of our filings or shared filings is our fleet offerings. So both companies would offer fleet make-ready support aligned with, as I described in the public workplace and large MUD make-ready filing. For Eversource, it would be limited to passenger vehicle fleets for the first 2 years, and then we would file midterm plan for medium and heavy duty make-ready infrastructure. For National Grid, they're introducing a medium and heavy duty fleet make-ready infrastructure from the beginning. Both companies would offer fleet assessment services much in the same way that National Grid does today, and would include online fleet electrification planning tools, which is more of sort of fleet assessment services light, where you would be able to go online and quickly, put in your information about the type of fleet you have, what type of vehicles are available, what your typical charging profile might look like, and sort of start the journey towards a more full-blown out fleet assessment service. And those are really the shared elements between National Grid and Eversource in our filings. Again, building off the lessons learned in our first 3.5 years of implementing, and also taking input from our stakeholders to build as comprehensive, robust, and effective infrastructure program as we can. I really do think that the collaboration, which was intense and intensive in the weeks leading up to our filings, made both filings stronger, and I think beneficial for all customers across the state. And with that, I will turn it to Carlton Simpson.
Thanks, Kevin. Good afternoon, everybody. Carlton Simpson from Unitil. Another element in the programs between the three companies where there's synergy regards our demand charge alternative proposal, recognizing the hurdle that demand charges can present to some charging stations and operators. We've proposed a demand charge discount program based on load factor and a sliding scale shown in the table to the right, looking at load factors from 0 to 15%. The utilities would annually evaluate the customer's load factor to determine the rate applicability for the year moving forward. And this has been offered in response to directives from the department and the legislature. Current general service rate structures would apply for customers with utilization greater than 15%, but for those customers where they are operating below 15% load factor, they'll receive the demand charge discount as provided here. Rishi, you can go to the next slide. We've also proposed a workforce development and electrician training program. This is co-sponsored by the three utilities. It's been proposed to create and facilitate new EV workforce entrants, targeting equity and underrepresented groups. And we're expecting somewhere in the range of 75 participants in the program, where we intend to train existing electricians and installers about commercial and residential EV infrastructure installation, the codes associated with it, best practices, along with the utility incentive programs as described here. And we're expecting over 1,000 trainees across the Commonwealth. Next slide, please. So looking at the unique offerings between each of the companies, as there's nuances amongst the utilities as well, I'll speak to Unitil's. So this is the first phase program for Unitil, looking at EV infrastructure and development programs. An area that's unique to us is the development of an opt-in electric vehicle time of use rate for residential EV charging. We have proposed a TOU rate that'll allow for discounted off-peak charging for customers that we hope to stimulate the market and provide an economic price signal to customers. we've proposed $700 EV charger installation rebates along with a $300 rebate for qualifying smart devices for customers in 1 to 4 unit residential dwellings who enroll on the EV time of use rate. For income qualified customers on the EV time of use rate living in 1 to 4 unit dwellings, we'll provide rebates covering 100% of the installation and procurement cost of the qualifying smart EVSE equipment up to $1,700. And similar to the other utilities, historic make-ready programs, we've proposed a utility side and customer side make-ready program for public EV charging. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rishi again.
Thanks, Carlton. As you can see, the utilities have coordinated extensively to come up with consistent programs. And in addition to that, there's also some elements that are kind of unique to each company. So on the National Grid side, some of our unique components are around the make-ready infrastructure as it relates to DCFC, and we will be providing limited support for proprietary plugs or networks for the make-ready work in order to encourage more DCFC sites in our territory. We are also proposing an innovative pilot or demonstration around utility-owned pole-mounted chargers. We have completed a project with the city of Melrose where we have deployed EV chargers on our utility poles, and we look to expand that and bring that offering to other communities, up to 10 more communities in this proposal. Additionally, we feel that there is a strong need to electrify school buses, and we look to propose incremental cost rebates between diesel and electric school buses for up to 300 buses during the course of this program. And this offering will be exclusively directed towards school buses operating in environmental justice communities. Additionally, we want to make sure that the DCFC deployment is also available in environmental justice communities. So we are committing to deploying DCFC charging in up to 10 communities in environmental justice community areas. And then finally, we are looking to expand our off-peak charging program that's already underway, but we're looking to expand that to include up to 1,000 commercial vehicles that we will enable through our fleet program. And additionally, looking to include features like flexible scheduling to maximize the rebates and avoiding so-called timer peaks that can happen with previously scheduled charging at a certain point. And then finally, we are looking to extend this program that was previously approved by an additional year so that it lines up with this new phase 3 proposed program, which is a 4-year program, and it will take us through the end of 2025 with this extension. Next, we'll jump to Eversource. Back to Kevin.
Yep, thanks, Rishi. And though it's listed as a unique offering, it's probably only unique in sort of the implementation approach. So our DC fast charging hubs in EJCs is very similar to what Rishi just described in National Grid's unique offerings. 2 other things that we'll be doing is we do plan to offer a car sharing pilot at some scale within EJC community or communities. And then finally, while I mentioned that initially Eversource is only going to offer make ready for passenger vehicle fleets, We will, from the outset, do make ready on pilot scale for medium and heavy duty fleets that either serve or are located in environmental justice communities, which could include things like school buses or last mile delivery fleets or other types of vehicles.
Great. Thank you all for that really informative and detailed presentation. Let me just say maybe a couple of quick things as you know, I think people take some of this information in, and I do invite ZEV commissioners to raise their hand if they have questions, or anybody to put a comment in the chat window. You know, I think one thing that I'm sure we're going to have a pretty complex and detailed conversation about over the course of the next year is, you know, how we should be thinking about assigning the costs of electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Obviously, I think we all recognize that's going to be a considerable cost, and at a time that we're trying to rapidly electrify the fleet. You know, I think one question that we're going to need to be wrestling with, you know, together and with the Department of Public Utilities, is how much of that cost, you know, should be borne by end users, by the driver at the end. How much of it can be borne by fleets? How much of it can be borne by site hosts of public charging infrastructure? You know, and how much you know, ultimately is going to come out of electric bills, which obviously is something that we know the AG and the Attorney General, the AG and the Department of Public Utilities is going to be very careful about. So, you know, we have a lot of those, a lot of people on this meeting who maybe can see different parts of that. You know, certainly want to invite electric vehicle service providers to think about, you know, whether some of the proposals on the table about DC fast charging and rate design, you know, are really adequate to be able to really speed the DC fast charging. You know, interested in folks in the auto industry or people who are thinking about this from a fleet owner perspective, you know, how this fits with you. Does this seem right? You know, how much do you see the trade-off between bill impact and end user cost? But maybe first to start with the utilities, as you guys think about that, you know, how do you guys see the role of the utilities and kind of making, how do you guys think of, you know, making the case for ratepayer, you know, investment in this area?
Dan, I can maybe kick it off and then see if others want to chime in. I think that's a good question and something that we've discussed quite a bit internally and with each other as well. I think we certainly feel that utilities have a unique role in enabling states' policy goals, and so we look to address the areas that we feel are most important for utilities involvement, such as the Make Ready programs, smart charging or managed charging programs, and additionally, we are looking for site hosts, for example, to pay for certain components of the programs, like the EV charging equipment itself, where we are providing partial support. And additionally, we will be looking to be complementary with other state programs, such as the Mass EVIP program that's managed by DEP. So our efforts would be incremental and above what the available funding is through these other programs. So those are just few areas that come to mind. You know, I'll open up for Kevin and Carlton to maybe chime in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We covered most of it. And I think we also, bring in expertise on system planning and the distribution system itself, right? So we work with customers to determine what the best locations are for EV charging in a way that minimizes strain on the grid or maximizes the benefits to the grid. So we do bring, especially now that we've collectively have many years now of deployment history. We do have these best practices on how to speed the process, how to do the permitting, how to make these stations get in the ground more effectively and more quickly. And so we're bringing that kind of construction and deployment expertise as well, which I think is an important role that we play.
And I would add, to emphasize the element that Rishi mentioned of smart charging, working with technology to give customers information on how to manage their own costs, but also to mitigate issues like peak demand on the system. That's why we've all coordinated on the managed charging and the technology elements to engage with different technology providers in the space. And one of the driving forces for Unitil to roll out time of use rates to help manage peak demand and push charging to off-peak times where customers save money, and it also limits additional demands on the system during those peak periods.
Great. We've had a couple of questions from the city of Cambridge about medium and heavy duty vehicles. Maybe beyond yes, Kevin, do you have anything to add? Maybe I know there's some complexity on the school bus side with some of the ownership questions. Do you have some thoughts to add about how cities can take advantage of this program?
So, details still to be worked out. I guess I didn't mean my answer to be flippant at all, but just that, yes, we would consider any electric vehicle that serves an EJ community or is located in an EJ community to potentially participate in the program. You're right that certain applications like school buses do come with a large degree of complexity, especially contractually when it comes to who owns the school bus, who is the customer of record for the electricity, where the school buses are located, particularly in New England and specifically in Massachusetts. A large number of our towns outsource to third-party providers to own and operate the vehicles themselves. Fortunately, we're building that expertise and fielding questions every day from communities across our service territory to help us develop how we best approach those specific instances. But certainly the programs are meant to be as inclusive as possible because these electrification goals are so aggressive. We want to do as much as possible to help whoever we can electrify their vehicles.
Great. Let's question coming from Brian Moran. How are you guys thinking about providing price transparency for residential charging and for publicly accessible charging?
Dan, can we clarify what do we mean by price transparency? Is that sort of pricing signal?
I interpreted this question as being about how are we being transparent about the cost of charging for drivers or for end users. That's what was my interpretation. Although Brian, weigh in if that's not the way you were thinking about it. Yes.
Okay.
How much does it pay to charge? How are we going to communicate that?
Yeah, and again, I think with our proposal, at least on the public workplace charging programs, we provide the flexibility for site hosts to price the cost of electricity. So it is up to the site host how they want to pass the cost of electricity to the drivers, and same thing on the fleets. On the residential side, the customers are billed for the same electricity rate that they are, at least in the case for National Grid, and I think I can say that for Eversource. We are providing the same pricing, and then including some aspects of managed charging, which can then help reduce the cost of charging at home. In the Unitil case, as Carlton mentioned, there is a unique offering there, and maybe Carlton, you might want to chime in there.
Sure. And I would note that it's an opt-in. So if customers want to choose our standard residential electricity price to charge, that's up to them. We offer this dedicated EV charging rate that has a time of use component that customers may select. In terms of transparency, just like all of our other electric service tariffs, this is a tariff-based rate that's will hopefully be approved by the Department of Public Utilities, and all of our rates and tariffs are available on our websites and with all the components described. So there's full transparency in the cost in all of the windows of charging.
Great, thanks. I'm gonna actually just, Jordan, if you wouldn't mind, maybe making your comment live. I think it would be valued.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. My internet's been a little spotty, so I figured text was safer. But in some conversations that COF, Sierra Club, and Acadia Center have had, we were discussing how valuable it would be for some facilitated stakeholder process and conversations to discuss all of these pieces beyond what's happening at the DPU. So including some of these new proposals, talking through some of the challenges and tricky questions that you mentioned, Dan, like cost allocation, who's going to pay for all of this critical infrastructure, figuring out how we as stakeholders in this space can communicate some of the differences between the utility programs to businesses or other community groups who might be active across utility territories. So realize it's a big conversation topic, but think it would be one that would be well worth having. And thanks again to the utilities for providing all this information and for reaching out to a lot of stakeholders along the way and developing their proposals.
Great. Any reactions from you guys, or we've got another comment coming? Tom Ashley, do you want to go ahead and give your perspective on this? Tom Ashley from Greenlots. I think you're unmuted.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dan. Filling in for my colleague Annie, who's taking some much needed time off right at the moment. I just want to thank all the utility reps here for both presenting and ultimately filing these programs. From a Greenlots perspective, we're incredibly excited about what might be possible if indeed these programs are approved, and really, the recognition of really the size of investment that's needed to start really addressing state goals. So just want to really, offer thanks, but also just want to acknowledge that, it may, to some of us, kind of go without saying, but I will say it here. And that is that, we really see from a Greenlots standpoint, these investments truly being ratepayer investments that really come with a lot of benefits down the road. And so very interested to kind of see how, the dynamic plays out through the regulatory process, of course, around that. But, we're seeing really, clear signals from other jurisdictions that ratepayers are really starting to benefit from these EV charging infrastructure investments and seeing a lot more EV load on the grid. So just want to acknowledge that. So, thanks, and look forward to seeing, what comes out the other side of the DPU process.
Thanks, Tom. Actually, if you wouldn't mind, if you wouldn't mind me putting you on the spot for a second, do you have a reaction to the DC fast charger rate design proposal specifically? Does that seem to you to be sufficient to be able to address some of the rate concerns that have come up around DC fast charger infrastructure in this state?
Yeah, good question, Dan. So I would just acknowledge, Greenlot's business model is not one of EV charging ownership. So we provide our products and services to clients who then own and operate charging stations. And so I'll just acknowledge that, we hear a range of perspectives from our clients, some who I would acknowledge are fairly sophisticated around how to utilize different software and physical technology elements to manage charging, and frankly, therefore better leverage various existing rates. But I will say we have a lot of clients and are certainly aware of many stakeholders out there who really think that different rate design is a critical, if not X factor in moving forward the economics of fast charging. I'll just acknowledge, we see an opportunity at significant or meaningful levels of EV adoption for existing sort of demand rates to actually be quite attractive. But I do think that a lot of stakeholders will be really encouraged by some of the components of these proposals that do seek to address operating expenses, not just capital expenses.
Great, thank you. Any reactions to that, or we might be time to move on to public comment? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much to our, oh, go ahead, Veena. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Thanks, Dan. I just wanted to echo, really appreciate all the work that the utilities have done and how they've engaged with a large number of groups on their proposal. Really appreciate the time and effort. I had a question that is not really related to the utility piece, but I was just wondering if this is a good time to bring it up.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, Sierra Club, for those who don't know me, my name is Veena Dharbaraj. I am the Director of Transportation at the Massachusetts Sierra Club. And Sierra Club, CLF, as well as Acadia Center, wanted to put forth a proposal for consideration of the ZEV Commission. We've been having some discussions prior to this meeting, and we wanted to propose that before the fall meeting of the ZEV Commission, we would like to share with you a written draft proposal or a draft resolution that would set goals for transitioning our transit fleets, our school bus fleets to electric versions, as well as establishing, things like the more EV rebate at the point of sale. So there are a large number of proposals in the EV space that the state would need to start working on to meet our climate goals. And we thought that a draft resolution, it would be good to discuss this at the next ZEV Commission meeting, and as well as maybe vote on the resolution either during the next meeting or in a forthcoming meeting after that. So just wanted to check with the commission members about your reactions to this. Welcome any comments, welcome suggestions as well. And also wanted to, I know Jordan mentioned that he's having internet troubles, but just feel free to chime in, Jordan, as well as Johannes, if I've missed anything.
Great, and we are now, I think, officially moving into public comment. So thanks, Vina, for that proposal. Jordan, do you want to jump in?
Not much to add, but would just echo that request. I think it's a great idea, and really wanted to recognize all of the stakeholder knowledge that's part of this ZEV commission, and think that we can really leverage that to move policy forward quickly and show broad support for what we all know needs to happen here. So thanks again, Vina.
Great. Well, so let me just say a couple of things from my sort of facilitator role here. I think I came on while we were in the middle of COVID. So online meetings have been the way that we've gone since I've been hosting these meetings, which I think has been great in a lot of ways. I think we do get more people here for them, but it has led to us being a little bit more kind of call and response than necessarily having commissioners come in and put things on the agenda and calling for votes and things like that. But as we start thinking about having in-person meetings again, which could be happening soon, and thinking about how this commission evolves from here, I think that is a potentially appropriate role for us to be thinking about. Certainly, as the state thinks about our revising our clean energy and climate plan, we are looking carefully at what we can expect, what our goals should be, what we should be thinking about for all kinds of different subsections within the transportation sector. So I think that getting feedback from this group of stakeholders as we start thinking about what goals are appropriate, what's really critical for us to get to our 2030 and 2050 limits. I think that moving in that direction definitely makes a lot of sense. So I'm interested in what you guys are putting together and thinking about, and I think it would be a good thing for us to have on the agenda for next time. But happy to hear from others, either on the commission or in the general public, either about that direction or if you have your own comments to make. Great. I'm going to give you guys a few more minutes to think about it. Let me just say that Anna Vanderspek just asked me a question, which I think is a good one for everyone to hear, which is that she was just asking about sort of who's formally on the ZEV commission right now, and who would be voting members for us to do that. I know that there are a number of groups, including people like Vina, who have replaced people who were formally announced at the ZEV commission in previous iterations that are kind of awaiting official recognition. But I will try to follow up with an updated list before our next meeting before we start thinking about things like voting. Okay, any other thoughts, questions, complaints, anything that anybody wants to bring up? Okay, hearing none. Thank you all for your participation today. Thanks especially to our utility partners for all the work that you guys put into those presentations. I thought it was very informative, and I look forward to keeping the conversation going with all of you guys. So thank you all very much, and you guys can have a half hour we're back to your day. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.